She was only 16, and that little motel room was the only place that didn't ask questions. The walls smelled like cheap disinfectant and old loneliness. The bedspread had stains no one saw anymore. But she saw everything. 'Cause when you're too young to be a mother, and too old to still be someone's little girl, the world gets blurry in the saddest ways. Her name was Maribel, a name too lovely for a story that started with shame. She carried a child in her belly, a child no one wanted, not even the green-eyed boy who whispered forever love behind the gas station on a rainy night. The woman at the front desk looked at her belly, then at her worn-out backpack, and just handed over the key. Room 6. Inside, with the hum of an old air conditioner and a flickering TV stuck on 2 channels, she sat on the edge of the bed and took her first deep breath in days. It wasn't peace. It was just silence. The kind of silence that screams. She emptied her pockets on the nightstand. Just enough coins for 2 more nights, if she didn't eat much. She had a half-eaten sleeve of crackers, a toothbrush, and a faded diary her grandmother gave her before she passed. "Right, honey. Sometimes paper listens better than people." Next door, something scraped across the floor. A man coughed. Heavy footsteps, slow, tired. She didn't know it yet, but just behind that thin wall was the beginning of everything. A quiet man, wearing a dark suit, with a face that hadn't seen a razor in days, eyes hollow with loss, the kind of man who once loved deeply and lost even deeper. Night fell slow, like it knew how much hurt lived in that place. And in the dark of room 6, Maribel cried, soft and careful, pressing her belly like her arms could shield the baby from the whole wide world. She had nowhere to go, but there was nowhere left to return either. And that, my dear, is where this story truly begins. If you've ever felt like the world gave up on someone too soon, then come sit a while with me. This story is about lost babies, found hearts, and a second cradle. He hadn't spoken to anyone in 3 days, not since he'd driven up from the estate, left behind marble floors, untouched meals, and the cold echo of an empty house. His name was Ellis Grant. If you read the headlines years back, you might remember him. Tech tycoon, reclusive millionaire, the man who built an empire in silence. But none of that mattered here. Not in this roadside motel with flickering lights and no cell service. Not in room 7, where he sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing the same suit from his wife's funeral. He didn't come to forget. He came to feel the weight. Alone. Ellis had never planned for fatherhood. He and Catherine tried. But life had other plans. 3 miscarriages. 1 near adoption that fell apart days before the papers were signed. They stopped hoping. And still, they held on to a little wooden cradle in the corner of their bedroom, just in case. Now Catherine was gone. A sudden stroke. No goodbye, just silence. And Ellis was a man hollowed out by grief. All he had left was a name on a stone and the sound of her laugh in his memory, soft as wind chimes on a warm porch. That night something pulled at him. Not loud, no cries, no voices, just a tension in the air. He heard the rustle through the wall, footsteps, then a muffled sob, a girl's sob. At first he tried to ignore it. Not his business, not his concern. But then a sharp intake of breath, a whispered, trembling voice. "Please, baby, just sleep for Mama." His hand froze on the whiskey glass. Something about that voice, so small, so desperate. It cracked through the armor he'd worn for months. The next morning he left a paper bag outside room 6. No note. Just a peanut butter sandwich, a bottle of apple juice, and a pack of prenatal vitamins he found at the gas station up the road. Inside room 6, Maribel blinked at the bag. Her first thought was fear, then confusion, then kindness. But kindness always came with a price, and she wasn't sure she could afford that. That afternoon, as she scribbled into her diary about the way the light came through the blinds, the way her baby's kicks felt stronger today, she heard it again. A knock, slow, deliberate. Room 7's door, opening. She peeked through the curtain. He was just standing there, not looking at her, just standing in the open doorway like he was waiting on a ghost. Then he turned his head. Their eyes met for the very first time, and in that split second, She saw something she hadn't seen in weeks. Recognition, not judgment, not pity, like he knew what it was to be almost gone, but just as quickly. He shut the door again, and Maribel felt something strange inside her chest. Not fear, not hope, something in between. That night, the baby wouldn't stop crying, and when she opened the door at 3:12 a.m., barefoot, desperate, trembling, there he was, already standing in the hallway, holding a warm towel and a can of soup. And in his eyes, there was a story, one she hadn't been ready to hear, until now. The hallway light buzzed above them, soft and yellow like old honey. Maribel stood barefoot on the cold tile floor, holding her baby, just a bundle of swaddling blankets and feverish whimpers. Her arms were trembling, her lips chapped from worry. She hadn't planned to open the door. She didn't even know why she did. But there he was, Ellis, in one hand, a towel warmed in the motel's coin dryer, in the other, a dented can of soup and an old thermos. He didn't say a word, just held out the towel, careful, like he was offering something sacred. "I can leave it here," he said finally, voice rough like gravel after rain. Maribel looked at the towel, then at her baby, then back at the man. Something in her eyes softened. She took the towel slowly, wrapped the baby tighter and whispered, "Thank you." He nodded once, like it hurt to move more than that, and turned to go. Wait, she surprised even herself. "Do you know how to make soup on a hot plate?" Ellis paused, then just for a second, almost smiled. The motel room smelled like salt and thyme by the time the soup started to simmer. Ellis moved with the careful rhythm of a man who used to cook for someone he loved. 2 mismatched mugs were set out, one for her, one left untouched. Maribel sat on the bed, rocking the baby gently. He'd stopped crying, finally, and his forehead was cooler, still warm, but no longer burning. Ellis didn't ask questions, didn't press her. He just stirred the soup, slowly, like the sound of it might comfort them both. After a while, she spoke. "I don't know what I'm doing," she whispered. He didn't look up. "I was supposed to graduate this year," she said. "Supposed to be in prom photos. Not here. Not like this." Ellis still said nothing, so she went on. "He left when I told him. My mom locked the door. My aunt said I could come stay but changed her mind, so I ended up here. I thought, maybe 2 nights. Then I'd figure it out. But," her voice cracked, "but my baby got sick, and I got scared, and now you're here and I don't know why." That's when he finally looked at her. "Sometimes people leave," he said gently, "and sometimes they're taken. But either way, the silence afterward feels the same." She blinked. "You lost someone." "My wife. I'm sorry." He nodded again. It was the kind of grief that had already taken all its words. The baby stirred, made a soft sound, then drifted back to sleep. "I don't even have a name for him yet," she murmured. "I thought maybe I shouldn't name him, just in case I couldn't. Keep him." And that's when Ella said something that made her chest feel like it might break open. "Name him," he said. "Even if the world forgets him, someone should remember." The room fell into a hush. Not empty, full. Then, a knock. Sharp, urgent. Maribel jumped. Ellis stood. Another knock. "Room 6. "Housekeeping," came a voice. But it was 10 at night. That wasn't housekeeping. And when Ellis opened the door, just a crack, he froze, because standing there was a man he remembered from years ago, and in his hand was a photograph of a girl, 16, pregnant, and smiling. The man at the door had the kind of posture that came from chasing things too long. His jacket was wrinkled, boots caked in dried mud, and his face, well, it had the kind of tired that don't wash off with sleep. He didn't introduce himself right away, just held up the photo, like it said more than he ever could. Ellis took it carefully, his eyes narrowing as he studied the edges. It was Maribel, no doubt, smiling in that way girls do when they still believe they're safe. She was standing in front of a swing set, one hand on her belly, the other holding a boy's hand. "Where did you get this?" Ellis asked, voice low. The man finally spoke. "She's my daughter." Ellis blinked, didn't show surprise, just grief. The man looked past him, into the room. "Is she here?" Ellis didn't answer. "She ran away 5 months ago," the man continued. "Told us she was going to stay with her aunt. That was the last time we heard anything. She said her mother locked her out." The man's jaw tightened. She wasn't supposed to tell you that. Ellis stepped into the hallway, pulled the door mostly closed behind him. She has a baby. He's been sick. I know. The man's eyes were glassy now. My grandson. I didn't even know he existed until a week ago. He ran a hand through thinning hair, looked down at the floor like the truth lived there. She sent a letter. No return address. Just said she was sorry. Said she named him Luca. Ellis exhaled, slowly. So she had named him, even when she thought no one would remember. She wrote that she didn't expect forgiveness, the man continued. But if we ever wanted to meet him, we could try. He looked up again. I've been to 8 motels. This is the 9th. Ellis didn't say a word. I just want to see her, the man added. Tell her. We didn't stop loving her. We just didn't know how to show it. Behind the door, Maribel had heard everything. She stood frozen in the dark, baby Luca in her arms, tears running down without permission. Her legs felt like paper, her heart like glass wrapped in cloth. She wanted to run, wanted to believe this was a trick. But the letter, the one she left at that rest stop bathroom, she never thought anyone would read it. She stepped closer to the door, close enough to hear her father's breathing. Then the baby stirred and let out a cry. Ellis turned. The sound cut the air like a church bell. The man's eyes changed. That's him, he whispered. That's my grandson. Inside, Maribel pressed her face into the baby's head, inhaling his smell, her body shaking like the end of a long storm. And then, gently, she reached for the doorknob. But before she could open it, Ellis said something quiet, something only she could truly understand. You don't have to decide tonight, he told her. Not everything broken needs to be fixed all at once. But outside that door, her father had already started crying. Soft, breathless sobs, like the kind a man makes when he finally remembers what love sounds like. And for the first time in her life, Maribel realized maybe she wasn't the only one who felt abandoned. She hadn't seen her father cry since the day her little brother was born. Back then, it was joy. This time, it was something heavier, something cracked open too late. Maribel stood behind the door, her hand on the knob, heart thudding like thunder wrapped in cotton. Luca shifted in her arms, small fingers curling near his cheek, as if he knew that something was changing. Ellis glanced back at her. He didn't rush, didn't push, just gave the smallest nod, like to say, whatever you choose, it's yours to choose. She opened the door, slowly. The light from the hallway spilled across the floor like morning through a half-drawn curtain. And there he was, her father, older than she remembered, shorter somehow. His shoulders curved forward not from age, but from shame. Hi, she said, barely louder than a breath. He looked at her the way some people look at stained glass, with awe and guilt and 100 memories all at once. Hi, baby. That word, baby. She hadn't heard it from him since she was 11, and scraped her knee on the porch step. She hugged Luca tighter. Her father's eyes went straight to the baby. So, Luca, he said, smiling like the name tasted like something soft and sacred. Maribel nodded. I like it. No one said anything for a moment. Then, her father cleared his throat. I didn't know how to handle it, he said. When you told us, your mother, she just froze, and I followed her lead because I didn't know how to choose you without losing her. You didn't have to choose, Maribel said softly. I just needed someone to stay. His face crumpled. I'm so sorry, Maribel. I've been sorry every day. We didn't stop loving you. We didn't know how to hold all of it. And then, she stepped forward. Not all the way, just enough. Luca in her arms like a bridge between what had been broken and what might still be healed. Her father reached out, but stopped short, waited. She looked down at her baby, then up at her father, then took a small breath and placed Luca gently into his arms. The old man held the child like he was made of stardust. And in that moment, something happened in Ellis. He turned his face away, stared at the chipped motel wallpaper like it could hold back what was rising in his chest. Grief, not for what he'd lost, but for what he'd never had. A child in his arms, a name chosen in hope, a face that looked up at him with trust. He didn't resent them for their reunion. No, but it stirred a hunger he'd buried deep, to be needed, to belong, to mean something again. Maribel noticed the quiet in him, and in a voice like the edge of a lullaby, she asked, "Do you want to hold him too?" Ellis looked up. "Me? Yeah," she said. "You were the first one who showed up when I was too scared to ask." Her father carefully passed Luca over, like handing off a candle that had just been lit. And when Ellis took him, his whole body softened. Luca blinked at him, just for a second, and then he smiled, the kind of smile that breaks men and remakes them. But before Ellis could say a word, Luca's tiny hand caught on the chain around his neck, pulled gently, and a locket slipped out from under his collar. A locket Maribel hadn't seen before, still closed, still heavy. She tilted her head. "What's that?" Ellis stared at it for a long time. "My wife's," he said. And then he opened it. Inside wasn't a photo of his wife. It was a picture of a baby. Tiny. Newborn. A baby Maribel didn't recognize. Ellis's voice cracked. She never told anyone, but there was one. Long ago. Maribel stared. Her father stared. And Luca just kept holding on to the chain. And that's when Ellis whispered, like he was confessing to the night itself. "I lost a child before I even got to be a father." The motel room was still. Not silent. No, still, like the air had paused to listen. Ellis held Luca gently, the tiny hand still curled around the silver locket on his chest. Inside, that old photograph seemed to glow, though the room was dim. A baby, unsmiling, swaddled in hospital white. A life that came and went before it ever got a name spoken aloud. Maribel sat on the corner of the bed, her knees pulled to her chest, arms wrapped tight around herself. Her voice was soft. "What happened?" Ellis didn't look up. "We were in our 20s. Catherine and I. We were married just 6 months. The pregnancy was a surprise, but we wanted that baby so much." He paused, breathed slow. "But he came early. So early. And the doctors said it was a matter of hours. We held him, watched the monitors, until they stopped." He traced a finger along the locket's edge. "We never told anyone. Didn't have the strength to explain a child we never got to bring home." Maribel's throat tightened. "I didn't know," she whispered. "You weren't supposed to," he said. "I built companies, flew on jets, threw money at foundations, but I never rebuilt the part of me that broke that day." He looked at Luca, whose tiny chest rose and fell with gentle rhythm. "And then I heard a baby cry through the wall, and something in me woke up." Maribel wiped a tear with the sleeve of her sweatshirt. "Sometimes I think the baby saved me, not the other way round." Her father, still standing in the doorway, nodded slowly. "I think maybe we're all just trying to find someone to save us a little." There was a quiet, heavy but kind, like a blanket laid across old wounds. Ellis looked at Maribel. "There's a place I haven't visited in months. Catherine's grave. I keep thinking about going. About bringing this one with me." He smiled down at Luca, introducing her to someone who made me believe again. Maribel tilted her head. "You want to take the baby to see her?" "If you'd let me." She hesitated. It wasn't that she didn't trust him. Not anymore. It was that trust still ached when it stretched too far, too fast. But then she looked at Ellis, at the softness in his hands, at the way he held her child, like something sacred, not fragile. "I think she'd like that," she said. 2 days later, they stood beneath a gray sky. The cemetery was quiet, blanketed in the kind of silence only stone can hold. Ellis walked ahead, holding Luca, a small knitted hat covering his little head. Maribel followed with slow steps. She didn't want to intrude, but something inside told her maybe she belonged here too. The grave was simple. Catherine Grant, beloved wife, forever kind. Ellis knelt down slowly. Luca gurgled, reaching a hand toward the wind. "This is him." Ellis whispered, "This is the child I never thought I'd hold. He's not mine, Catherine, but he's part of what's healing me." Behind him, Maribel's hand went instinctively to her chest. Not fear, not grief, just something soft and new. But just as Ellis laid a small wildflower on the headstone, Maribel noticed something. A small worn teddy bear placed at the base of the grave, old, faded, and tucked into its ribbon. A folded note. She knelt beside it, fingers trembling as she opened the paper. Inside, in tiny, careful handwriting, "For the child we never met, from the boy you once saved." Her eyes widened, because at the bottom of the note was a name she hadn't heard in years. A name from her own past. A name she never told anyone. Not even Ellis. She turned toward him, pale. "Ellis," she whispered. "This note. It's signed by someone I knew before I ever came here." He looked at her, confused, concerned. "Who?" She swallowed hard. "Daniel. My first foster brother. He disappeared when I was 10. She looked back at the grave. The wind picked up just slightly, like it was listening too. Maribel stood frozen beside the grave, the note still open in her hand. Her eyes locked on the little figure watching from the edge of the trees. He didn't move, didn't wave, just stood there, part shadow, part memory. The bracelet on his wrist caught the light, blue thread, a single white bead in the center. She'd made it the night he left without goodbye, left in the middle of a thunderstorm. She'd been 10. He was 12. They were each other's only softness in a house that bruised with silence. "Daniel?" she called out, barely believing the sound of his name in her mouth again. The figure stepped forward, slowly, cautiously, like someone used to being chased, not welcomed. Ellis turned, instinctively stepping in front of Maribel and Luca, but she placed a hand on his arm. "It's okay," she whispered. "I know him." The boy, now a young man, finally came into full view. He was taller, of course, thinner than he should have been, but the eyes, they hadn't changed. Still wide, still wary, still full of stories he never got to tell. "Maribel?" he asked, voice hoarse from more than just the cold. She nodded, stunned. The years collapsed between them like paper walls. "What are you doing here?" she breathed. "I come every week," he said, glancing at Catherine's grave. "I didn't know it was hers until the groundskeeper told me. He said her husband visits sometimes, alone, leaves flowers but never speaks." He looked at Ellis, then down at Luca. "I saw you today. I thought maybe I shouldn't stay. But then I saw the bracelet." He lifted his wrist. "You kept it?" she asked, tears welling. "I never took it off," he replied. "Not once." Ellis stepped back slightly, giving them space, but he stayed close enough, like a steady tree in a storm they didn't know they were walking into. "I thought you were gone," she said. "I was." Daniel looked down. "After that night, when they took me away, I bounced around. 5 homes in 3 years. Then the streets. Got picked up for stealing food at 15. A woman named Catherine Grant paid my bail." Maribel's breath caught. "She told me," Daniel continued, "that I didn't owe her anything. That sometimes a warm bed and a gentle voice are enough to start again." He looked back at the grave. "She taught me how to breathe again." Maribel felt her knees give a little. She sat in the grass beside the headstone. "You knew her?" He nodded. "She gave me a job at her bookstore. Taught me how to balance a register. Gave me tea when I had nightmares. I never told her about you, but I think somehow she knew. She always said, 'Some wounds run in pairs.'" Ellis's eyes filled with quiet thunder. He crouched beside them. "You were the boy," he said. "The one she kept saying was light in a locked room." Daniel smiled faintly. "I never thought I'd see you again, sir." Ellis shook his head. "I never thought I'd meet the reason she kept hope alive when I couldn't." Luca stirred in Maribel's arms, tiny fingers grasping at nothing. She rocked him gently, the weight of 3 lives converging around her. "You saved me once," she said to Daniel. "I didn't do much. You stayed," she said. "That was everything." Daniel looked at her, eyes glistening. "Can I?" he asked softly, reaching a hand toward Luca, but pausing halfway. She nodded. Daniel touched the baby's hand. Just for a moment. Luca didn't flinch. He curled his fingers around Daniel's pinky and held on. And that's when Daniel whispered something none of them expected. "I have something to tell you both. Something about Catherine. Something she wrote the day before she died." Ellis straightened. "What do you mean?" Daniel reached into his coat, pulled out a folded envelope, a little worn at the edges, stamped with one name. "To the child we couldn't keep, and the ones still searching." Inside was a will, but not a legal one. A letter, a choice, and a name neither Ella nor Maribel had ever heard before. Daniel unfolded the letter with careful hands, like it was something alive, like it could still breathe if he held it gently enough. Ellis's fingers were already trembling, not from age, but from that kind of fear that only comes when you love someone too much to lose them twice. Maribel leaned in. Luca pressed against her chest. The air smelled like wet grass and lavender. The way cemeteries do when the sky can't decide if it wants to cry or rest. Daniel cleared his throat and began to read. To the child we couldn't keep, and the one still searching. If you're holding this, then you found each other. And I can only hope you've done so gently. There was a time I believed the world would never give us a second chance. That the cradle we built would stay empty. But life has its own strange kindnesses. This letter isn't legal. It won't hold up in court. It isn't made of rules. It's made of love and choice. To the child we lost, you'll never have a name in stone. But you lived inside me long enough to teach me how to love without fear. To Daniel, the boy with quiet eyes and a heart like a door left open, thank you for letting me mother you when I didn't know I still could. And to Ellis, if you're reading this, my love, then it means your heart stayed soft, even without mine beside it. Please know, I never stopped hoping for you, even when we stopped hoping for children. Which is why I left something in the attic, behind the cradle. It isn't money. It's a name I never told anyone. One I wrote the day I felt a heartbeat that didn't stay. I think I knew someday you'd meet a child who needed to be named. And maybe, just maybe, you'd offer that name like a second cradle. Daniel's voice broke then. He lowered the letter. Silence wrapped around them like a shawl. Ellis looked down, eyes glossy, mouth trembling. She never told me. She didn't think you were ready to hear it, Daniel said softly. Not then, but she left it for you to find. Maribel reached out, her fingers brushing Ellis's. I think maybe you were both waiting for a moment like this. Ellis looked down at Luca, sleeping again now, peaceful as morning. I have a house, he said slowly. I haven't stepped into the attic since the day she passed. I couldn't. Maribel said nothing. But Daniel? He nodded. I'll go with you, he said. Maribel hesitated. I don't know if I should, she murmured. It's your house, your grief. Ellis looked up, met her eyes. Grief doesn't live in square footage, he said. It lives in people. And right now, the people I want with me are standing here. That evening, the three of them drove north, through winding roads, past tired towns and gas stations that hadn't changed their prices in years. When they reached the house, the sun was just beginning to fall, painting the windows in gold and memory. It was big, yes, but not grand. Not anymore. Not without laughter. Not without light. Ellis unlocked the door. The hinges creaked like they missed being useful. Inside, everything was exactly where she left it. A teacup still drying near the sink. A sweater folded on the arm of the couch. And in the corner of the front room, the cradle. Dusty, untouched, waiting. Ellis stood in front of it for a long time. Then, slowly, he reached behind it and pulled down the attic cord. The ladder creaked as he climbed. Daniel followed behind. Maribel waited at the bottom, rocking gently with Luca in her arms. Above, the attic smelled of cedar and old papers. They found the box in the far corner, tied with blue ribbon. Inside, a baby blanket, a half-knitted sweater, and a single envelope marked, "If a child ever finds you." Ellis opened it. Inside was a note, just 4 words. His name is Jonah. Back downstairs, Ellis placed the blanket gently in the cradle, then turned to Maribel, voice soft. If you'd let me, I'd like to offer him that name. She looked down at Luca, then up at Ellis. I think he already chose you, she said. And for the first time since the funeral, Ellis smiled without apology. But just as they stood in that moment, the cradle, the letter, the baby between them, Daniel cleared his throat. There's one more thing, he said. He held out a photograph, old, torn, but unmistakable. In it, a young woman holding a baby, standing in front of the very same cradle, smiling. Maribel squinted. That's not Catherine, Ellis blinked. No, he whispered. It's my sister. And on the back, written in faded ink, to my daughter, wherever she may be. The room fell still. Ellis took the photograph with slow, reverent hands, like touching it might wake something buried too long. He turned it over again, read the words out loud. To my daughter, wherever she may be. His voice caught in his throat. Maribel stood beside him, holding Luca tighter, her mind racing through the echoes of 1,000 things unsaid. Your sister, she had a baby? Ellis nodded, eyes far away. She was 17. disappeared for a while. When she came back, she was quiet, changed, said the baby didn't make it, that it was best we didn't ask questions. Daniel moved to look at the photo. That's the same cradle, he whispered. That's this room. Ellis nodded again. Catherine and I restored it when we moved in. We thought it was just a family heirloom. Didn't know it had already held someone else's hope. He sank down onto the arm of the couch, the photograph in one hand, the letter from Catherine in the other. And then, slowly, he looked up at Maribel. What was your mother's name? She hesitated. It felt strange, like naming a ghost that still walked in her bones. Darla Jean, she said. She never told me much about her family. Said I didn't need to know. Ellis closed his eyes. His voice was barely a whisper. My sister's name was Darla. Silence crashed through the room like a wave. Maribel staggered back slightly, clutching Luca as if the ground had shifted under her. No, that's not possible. She would have been 16 when she disappeared, Ellis said. She went to live with a cousin out of state, came back alone, refused to talk about it. My parents never pushed. And then she left again, for good this time. Daniel sat down slowly, stunned. Maribel's voice trembled. She always said I didn't come from much, that I was lucky she kept me as long as she did. Ellis stood up. You're not just some girl who ended up at my door, Maribel. He stepped forward. You're my niece. Tears filled her eyes. No, this doesn't make sense. Why would she never tell me? Why would she? Because shame makes people cruel, Ellis said. Because she didn't know how to face what she lost. Because she thought burying the truth would keep it from hurting. He touched the cradle. She tried to erase you, but life brought you right back to the very place she tried to forget. Maribel sank down onto the floor. Luca curled against her chest. Her shoulders shook, not from fear, but from something older, something like being seen. Daniel sat beside her, hand on her back. I used to dream you had family out there, he said quietly. Someone who would call your name and mean it. Ellis knelt before her. You do. Maribel looked up, eyes red, breath catching. So, Luca is your great-nephew? Ellis smiled through tears. If you'll let me, I'd like to just call him grandson. And something in her cracked. Not in pain this time, but like a window finally letting the light back in. But before the quiet could settle, Luca let out a soft cry. Not distress, something else. And then the lights flickered. Just once. Ellis stood up, instinctively scanning the room. Daniel narrowed his eyes. Did you see that? Maribel nodded. The room went still again. And then a knock, 3 soft taps, at the front door. Ellis walked over, careful, heart thudding. When he opened it, no one was there, except a box, small, wrapped in brown paper, with handwriting that made his breath catch. It was Catherine's, and the note on top read, for the name he was always meant to carry. And inside was a birth certificate, blank, but signed, waiting. Ellis carried the small brown package into the living room like it was made of glass. His hands trembled slightly, but not from fear, from reverence. He laid it gently on the table beside the cradle, where the past and present already sat, shoulder to shoulder. Daniel leaned in, curiosity etched into his young face. Maribel stayed seated on the floor, still holding Luca, her heart stretched between too many truths, all at once. This is her handwriting, Ellis whispered. I'd know it anywhere. He ran his thumb over the edges of the envelope. The seal had been broken before, years ago maybe, but the paper was preserved like someone had always known it would be needed one day. He unfolded it slowly. Inside, a birth certificate form, unsigned, unstamped, but written at the top, in ink that had faded a little with time, was a name, Jonah Ellis Grant. Maribel's breath caught. Daniel sat straighter. Ellis blinked. She filled it out, but never filed it. She wanted you to have a child, Maribel whispered. He nodded slowly, but she knew it wasn't just about blood. He handed the certificate to Maribel. There's a space here, he said softly. For mother's name, for father's. It's blank on purpose. Maribel stared down at it. Her hand rested on Luca's back. I'm not asking for anything, Ellis said gently. I want you to know this home has room for both of you, no matter what name he carries. Tears slipped down Maribel's cheeks. She wiped them with the back of her hand, looking from the form to Ellis to the cradle. "I spent my whole life being someone people forgot," she said. "Now suddenly, I'm someone's daughter, someone's niece, someone's mama." Daniel gave a soft laugh beside her. "And someone's protector. Don't forget that." She looked at Luca, his tiny hand curled around the edge of her sweater. "I don't need him to carry my name," she said. "He doesn't need to carry the weight of my story." She looked at Ellis. "But maybe he could carry hers." Ellis swallowed hard. "You mean Jonah?" She nodded. "And if you're willing, I'd like you to be the one who signs his name." Ellis froze, like time paused to watch. Are you sure?" "You held him before I knew I could trust anyone," she said. "You didn't try to fix me. You just stayed." Ellis looked at Luca, at Jonah, and then back at Maribel. "Then I'd be honored." The pen felt heavy in his hand, the kind of weight that only comes with deep meaning. He signed in careful strokes, "Father, Ellis Grant," and when he finished, he handed the pen to Maribel. She didn't hesitate. "Mother, Maribel Jean," and together they laid the paper inside the cradle, atop the little blanket Catherine had left behind. Daniel smiled faintly. "Now that's a second cradle," he said. But just as the peace began to settle into their bones, a phone rang. Not Ellis's, not Daniel's. It was Maribel's, the burner phone she'd bought weeks ago. She frowned, confused. No one had this number. She picked it up. "Hello?" A silence. Then a voice, young, nervous, male. "Maribel." Her blood ran cold. She hadn't heard that voice since the day she told him she was pregnant. "Trevor?" she whispered. Ellis and Daniel both looked up. "I know I don't deserve this call," the voice said. "But I think I just found out something that changes everything." A pause. "I think I was adopted too. And I think you might be the only person who can help me find the truth." Maribel's hand shook, because suddenly, the boy who left her behind was now the one asking to be found. Maribel gripped the phone tighter, like it might slip right through her fingers if she let it feel too real. On the other end, Trevor's voice was thin. Not quite the boy who left, but not yet a man either. "Are you still there?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. She closed her eyes, took a breath. "I'm here." Ellis stood silently across the room, holding Jonah close to his chest. Daniel sat beside her, steady, silent, a quiet reminder that she wasn't alone anymore. Trevor exhaled. "Look, I know I was a coward. I know what I did, or didn't do. You told me you were pregnant and I disappeared, and there's no excuse that'll make that okay." Maribel's voice was calm, but clear. "No, there's not." He didn't argue. "But something happened last week," he said. "My mom got sick. She started talking about things that didn't make sense, about how I wasn't really hers, about how I had a sister once. A baby girl she said she couldn't keep." Maribel's stomach turned. Trevor went on. "I thought it was the medication. I tried to ignore it. But then I found a box, old papers, photos. One of them, it looked like you." Her heart stopped. "She had a note with it," Trevor continued. "Written in handwriting I didn't recognize. It said, 'Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I couldn't choose.'" Maribel's mouth went dry. "She used those words," she whispered. "Exactly those words." Trevor's voice cracked. "I think we have the same mother." The room went still. Ellis sat down slowly. Daniel stared at the floor. "I don't know what this means," Trevor said. "I don't know why we were separated or how she kept it all buried, but I can't shake the feeling that maybe this mess is bigger than us." Maribel swallowed hard. "You're saying you think we're siblings?" "I don't know what we are," he whispered, "but I want to find out." After she hung up, the silence was thick as fog. Maribel sat for a long time staring at the baby sleeping in Ellis's arms. The name Jonah, already soft on her lips. The name of a child lost, and now found again in a second life. Daniel was the first to speak. "I remember Trevor," he said, "from the group home. He was there a few weeks, quiet, always looking over his shoulder." Maribel looked up. "I thought I loved him." Daniel didn't smile, didn't tease. "I think you did." Ellis stood and crossed to her, gently placing Jonah in her arms again. "Sometimes we love people who don't know how to be loved yet," he said softly. "That doesn't make us foolish. It makes us whole." She looked down at Jonah, his tiny chest rising and falling in a perfect rhythm of trust. "He wants to meet me," she said. "To talk. Said he's in the next county over." Ellis gave a single nod. Then we go. We? She asked, startled. He smiled. You're not going back alone anymore. The next morning they drove. The sky was pale blue, the kind that looks like it could rain or shine depending on how the wind feels. They met at a small park off a quiet road. Trevor was already there, sitting on a bench, twisting a ball cap in his hands. When he saw her, he stood, and for a second, he looked just like the boy she remembered. Green eyes, nervous hands, that lost look that used to make her ache. But she didn't ache now. She just saw him. He stepped forward slowly. Maribel? She nodded. Trevor? He looked down at the bundle in her arms. That's him? She held Jonah a little closer. This is Jonah. Trevor blinked, emotion rising quick. Can I? She shook her head gently. Not yet. He nodded. Fair. They sat down together. The conversation was halting at first, cautious. But then stories came, childhood memories that didn't line up, until they did. We were both with her, Trevor said finally. At different times. You got her when she still believed she could do it. I got her after she stopped trying. He pulled a photo from his jacket. The same woman, same eyes, different seasons. I think she loved us, he said. But I also think she didn't know how. Maribel looked at him, this boy who had once abandoned her, and now sat beside her, broken open. You didn't know how either, she said. He looked away, ashamed. But maybe now you do. He turned back slowly, and in her arms Jonah stirred, reached one tiny hand toward Trevor's knee. No fear, just curiosity, and Trevor, trembling, placed his finger near Jonah's hand, and was caught, gently, completely, and something broke. Trevor's shoulders shook. I didn't think I could ever be part of something good again, he whispered. Maribel looked at him. You don't have to be perfect to be part of it. She looked out at the trees, gold and green, the wind brushing them like a lullaby. You just have to stay. And that evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Trevor asked a question she never expected. Would you let me write his middle name? The wind had quieted by then. The trees stood still, like even they were waiting to hear what she'd say. Trevor sat with both elbows on his knees, staring at the baby wrapped in blue. His voice, when he spoke, was different now, like a boy who'd finally heard his own echo and decided he didn't want to be alone anymore. I don't expect a place in his life, he said. I didn't earn that. But if there's a space, even a small one, maybe I could help name the space I left behind. Maribel looked down at Jonah, sleeping so soundly it almost hurt to breathe. His tiny hand still curled around her finger like he already knew the world was a mix of hurt and healing. She thought about all the names she'd once imagined, how she used to whisper them to her belly at night in that motel room. Eli, maybe James, or something soft, like Micah. She never once said Trevor, but now, sitting beside the boy who ran, hearing the ache in his voice, she realized something. Jonah had already been born with enough stories in his skin. He didn't need to carry anger too. She lifted her head, looked at Trevor, and asked, What name would you choose? Trevor blinked. I thought about it for a long time. Not just something that sounded good, but something that meant something. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded paper, creased at the corners, handled too many times. He opened it slowly and read. Asher? Maribel's eyebrows lifted. Trevor smiled faintly. It means happy or blessed. In Hebrew? I don't know where I found it, but I like the idea that he could grow up with joy, even if he came from a lot of mess. Maribel looked down at Jonah. Jonah Asher. The name settled around the baby like a blanket knit from something old and kind. Ellis, who had stood quietly just a few feet away, finally spoke. That name would have made Catherine smile. Daniel nodded. She would have said it felt meant. Trevor's voice cracked. I've done so many things wrong, but if he grows up with even one piece of light that I didn't have, then maybe I didn't fail him completely. Maribel stood, walking to Ellis. She handed him Jonah. No hesitation this time. Would you do the honors? Ellis took him, cradling Jonah against his chest. Jonah Asher Grant, he said softly. Named in love, carried in sorrow, born into a second cradle. Trevor sat back down, wiping his eyes with the sleeve of his jacket. Thank you, he said. And it wasn't just for the name. Later that night, back at the house, Ellis pulled the box Catherine had left once more. There was one item no one had noticed before, folded in the very bottom, under the blanket. A letter, addressed only, "To the mother of the child." Maribel opened it slowly. Catherine's handwriting was soft and round. "To you, who carried him first. Thank you for keeping him safe when I couldn't. Thank you for naming him, even if it hurt. Motherhood isn't biology. It's bravery. And if you're reading this, then you're braver than most. Don't forget, sweet girl, you were someone's daughter before you were anyone's mother. And you are not alone." Maribel folded the letter against her heart. She looked over at Ellis, who was gently rocking Jonah near the window, and then at Daniel, who was stringing lights across the front porch, like it mattered, and Trevor, asleep in the chair, arms crossed, but closer than he'd ever been. And she realized, maybe family isn't built all at once. Maybe it's layered, slow, like bread rising in a warm kitchen, like light creeping through the cracks. She stepped out onto the porch, the air cool and soft. The stars were beginning to come out one by one. She held Jonah close, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "You'll grow up with stories, but you'll never have to wonder if you were wanted." And just then, the porch light flickered once, then glowed steady, as if the house had heard her and believed. But inside, tucked under the cradle's mattress, Daniel found something, a piece of paper, folded tight, a receipt from 18 years ago, signed not by Catherine, not by Ellis, but by someone else entirely. A name Maribel hadn't seen in nearly 2 decades, and one that didn't belong to her mother. Daniel turned the slip of paper over and over in his hand. It was a receipt, yellowed at the edges, time-stamped and faded, from a women's shelter on the other side of the state. Maribel took it, her breath catching. There at the bottom, scribbled in quick, neat letters, "Infant Placement Intake. Guardian, Anna M. Lowell." She stared at the name. "I don't know her." Ellis stepped beside her. "She was Catherine's friend. They ran that shelter together in the early years, before we married." Maribel's fingers trembled. "Why would my name be here? Why would this be under the cradle?" Daniel spoke quietly. "Because I don't think your mother kept you, as long as she said she did." Ellis looked at her, slowly realizing she might have placed you once, then taken you back. Maribel's whole chest went tight. "I always had this one memory," she whispered, "of being somewhere warm, with a woman who smelled like cinnamon. I never knew if it was real." She looked down at Jonah. "But maybe it was. Maybe I was held by someone kind once." Daniel nodded. "And maybe that woman, Anna, saw your name again, years later. Maybe Catherine asked her to keep the receipt, in case the past ever circled back." Ellis gently touched the edge of the paper. Or maybe she was the first cradle. The house was quiet now. The porch lights glowed warm. Dinner dishes were drying in the rack. Jonah was asleep in the cradle, the little one that had waited so long to be filled. Maribel stood in the doorway of what used to be a guest room. Now it held a rocking chair, a quilt, a mobile that Ellis found in a forgotten drawer. Daniel sat cross-legged on the floor, writing in his journal. Trevor had gone out to get groceries. Nothing fancy, just milk and bread and baby wipes. It felt like a home, not the kind built with blueprints, but the kind built with people who stayed. Ellis brought her a mug of tea, set it gently in her hands. "I don't know what we are," she said softly. "Family, foundlings, accidents that turned into grace?" He smiled. "We're a second chance. That's enough." She looked at the cradle, Jonah's breath rising and falling like tides. "I used to think I ruined my life the night I found out I was pregnant." She looked at Ellis. "But maybe that was the night I began to save it. It wasn't a wedding. It wasn't a parade. It was just a Sunday afternoon. Jonah gurgling on a blanket in the yard. Daniel playing guitar softly on the steps. Trevor fixing the screen door that always stuck. Maribel sat on the porch with Miss Martha's voice warm as ever. It wasn't a wedding. Wasn't a parade. Just a Sunday afternoon. Jonah was giggling on a quilt in the yard, chubby fingers grasping at dandelions. Daniel strummed a slow tune on the porch steps, eyes half closed, heart wide open. Trevor was fixing the screen door that always stuck, tongue between his teeth, muttering like it mattered more than it did. Maribel sat in the rocking chair, tea in hand, hair messy, peaceful. And Ellis? He was planting roses by the fence, the kind Catherine used to love, soft yellow ones, like a sunrise that didn't need to hurry. No one spoke much, but everything spoke. The creak of the rocker, the hush of wind through cottonwood leaves, the steady breath of a baby asleep under the sky. Later that evening they would sit around the table. They'd laugh, pass bread, argue over who forgot the baby wipes. They would not say, "We are a perfect family." They would say, "We showed up, and we stayed." And that would be enough. Some stories don't end with wedding bells, you know. Some end with a name written in love, a cradle finally filled, and 4 people who thought they'd been forgotten, realizing they were always meant to find each other. So if this story found a quiet place in your heart tonight, leave a little note down below, won't you? Just a word, a whisper, because the porch light's always on here at Second Cradle, and there's always room for one more story.